Good morning. Today I'm going to read from a book by Toni Morrison called Sula. Most of you probably know her from Beloved or The Bluest Eye. She won the Nobel for Literature. I loved Beloved, but Sula especially spoke to me in some way. It's about two young women who go in very different directions in their lives, and to me the theme was interesting. I think it's basically explores the idea that every community thrives and survives because of the differences that people bring to that community, no matter what their race or sexuality or whatever. Sula. In that place where they tore the nightshade and blackberry patches from their roots to make room for the Medallion City golf course, there was once a neighborhood. It stood in the hills above the valley town of Medallion and spread all the way to the river. It is called the suburbs now, but when black people lived there, it was called the bottom. One road, shaded by beeches, oaks, maples, and chestnuts, connected it to the valley. The beeches are gone now, and so are the pear trees where children sat and yelled down through the blossoms to passers-by. Generous funds have been allotted to level the stripped and faded buildings that clutter the road from Medallion up to the golf course. They are going to raise the time-and-a-half pool hall where feet in long tan shoes once pointed down from chair rungs. A steel ball will knock to dust Irene's Palace of Cosmetology, where women used to lean their heads back on sink trays and doze, while Irene lathered new Nile into their hair. Men in khaki work clothes will pry loose the slats of Reba's grill, where the owner cooked in her hat because she couldn't remember the ingredients without it. There will be nothing left of the bottom. The footbridge that crossed the river is already gone. Perhaps it is just as well, since it wasn't a town anyway. Just a neighborhood where on quiet days people in valley houses could hear singing sometimes, banjos sometimes, and if a valley man happened to have business up in those hills, collecting rent or insurance payments, he might see a dark woman in a flowered dress doing a bit of cakewalk, a bit of black bottom, a bit of messing around to the lively notes of a mouth organ. Her bare feet would raise the saffron dust that floated down on the coveralls and bunion split shoes of the man breathing music in and out of his harmonica. The black people watching her would laugh and rub their knees, and it would be easy for the valley man to hear the laughter and not notice the adult pain that rested somewhere under the eyelids, somewhere under their head rags and soft felt hats, somewhere in the palm of the hand, somewhere behind the frayed lapels, somewhere in the sinew's curve. He'd have to stand in the back of Greater St. Matthew's and let the tenor's voice dress him in silk, or touch the hands of the spoon carvers who had not worked in 8 years, and let the fingers that danced on wood kiss his skin. Otherwise the pain would escape him, even though the laughter was part of the pain. A shucking, knee-slapping, wet-eyed laughter that could even describe and explain how they came to be where they were. A joke, a nigger joke. That was the way it got started. Not the town, of course, but that part of town where the Negroes lived, the part they called the bottom, in spite of the fact that it was up in the hills. Just a nigger joke. The kind white folks tell when the mill closes down and they're looking for a little comfort somewhere. The kind the colored folks tell on themselves when the rain doesn't come or comes for weeks and they're looking for a little comfort somehow. A good white farmer promised freedom and a piece of bottom land to his slave if he would perform some very difficult chores. When the slave completed the work, he asked the farmer to keep his end of the bargain. Freedom was easy. The farmer had no objection to that, but he didn't want to give up any land. So he told the slave that he was very sorry that he had to give him the valley land. He had hoped to give him a piece of the bottom. The slave blinked and said he thought the valley land was bottom land. The master said, "Oh no, see those hills? That's the bottom land, rich and fertile." "But it's high up in the hills," said the slave. High up from us, said the master, but when God looks down, it's the bottom. That's why we call it so. It's the bottom of heaven, best land there is. So the slave pressed his master to try to get him some. He preferred it to the valley, and it was done. The nigger got the hilly land where planting was backbreaking, where the soil slid down and washed away the seeds, and where the wind lingered all through the winter, which accounted for the fact that white people lived on the rich valley floor in that little river town in Ohio, and the blacks populated the hills above it, taking small consolation in the fact that every day they could literally look down on the white folks. Sula by Toni Morrison.